look lifeless defensively, out of sorts, the meshing parts. And this is stuff we knew all year, even before they lost Ben Simmons. This is stuff that's been brewing for a couple of years. And I go to their contracts, and Tobias Harris, 5 for 12 in Game 2, making $41 million in 2024. The Horford contract we all know about, 223, $130 million. And Bede, Simmons, are they going to stick with them together? Those are the big stories everyone's talking about right now. But I look around the league, and this is what must drive you crazy as a Sixers fan. Timothy Luau, over 30 points in 2 games for the Nets, making $600K with them. Probably the most important player right now. Markelle Fultz leading a victory over the Bucks, Game 1. Butler thriving in Miami. Covington thriving in Houston. Sarge with the 8-0 Suns. Noel, important rotation player with the Thunder. Okafor, good rotation player with the Pelicans. Trey Burke.
No, we're not.
I knew you were going to pause on that one. I just want to have as many names on there as possible. But the last two count. Trey Burke, good with Dallas. TJ McConnell, good with Indiana. How did they let this many good guys go?
Well, what they did was they hired Elton Brand as GM for some reason. Look, I like Elton Brand. He seems like a great guy. It's insane to me that team at that time, 2 summers ago, gave the keys to that franchise with those 2 young players and all of those assets that you just named and picks to a guy with no experience. It's like David Griffin was out there. Go get him. Pay him whatever he wants, but they have some of the worst owners in all of sports. Those guys, I mean, I gave them so much credit for buying into the Hinkie process, where it's like, look, we're going to have some tough years here, but it's all about that end goal. And they signed off on it. And the worst thing you can do, it's like, you know what the analogy is like what we did as a country. We quarantined and then we just quit too early. And then we had spikes again. They quit too early with the tanking, or not with the tanking, but with Hinkie, because they were done. They were going to get that first pick. They hadn't won the lottery yet, but they were going to get the Simmons pick. And then, the league forced Colangelo on them. And, oh, man, I hate the Colangelos. Boy, I don't like them. And, it was just like – they just did Hinkie dirty. And now we'll never know. I mean, Hinkie could have really screwed things up maybe. But now I will always hold him in high esteem because everything he did led to like just so much opportunity. And then when Colangelo had the burner gate, that was like, I remember podcast after podcast after podcast. Is this the most desirable position in all of sports ever? Like people were literally talking about how it's like in all sports, has there ever been a better situation for a GM? And then they hired Elton Brand, and it's like, what are we doing? And the Butler trade, I was like, you know what?
It was good.
I like that move. They didn't even have to trade Markelle, because at the time I was like, just don't trade Markelle during the season. Yeah. It was his 2nd year in the league. He's the first pick. You just picked him number 1. Yeah, he had a weird thing going with the shooting, but like, whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, moving on, he probably never would have succeeded in Philadelphia, but just selling him off for such like little return, like they eventually did, was just a joke. But the Jimmy Butler deal was good, and then the Tobias one was just like, boy, you're kind of going all in now. And then losing to the Raptors in Game 7 last year with the Kawhi shot, you're like, all right, well, what are they gonna do? They're gonna bring guys back. I didn't hate leaving Butler. I'm gonna be honest, like losing Butler, because to me it was like Butler means no Ben. I was like, Ben Simmons, I can't see thriving with Butler. They're just, Ben needs the ball, and Butler is an alpha. And all the success that they were having was with Butler, running pick and rolls with Joel Embiid. And so him leaving, I was like, all right, now Ben's got to step up. Ben's got to come back and prove with a shot and everything. And, that obviously didn't happen. And then they got Josh Richardson in the sign and trade. So I was like, it's beautiful. But then they signed Al, and you're just like, okay. I mean, I talked to a bunch of Sixers fans. They were like, we all kind of like sold ourselves on that. But the first instinct was just like,
without any evidence. And losing Redick hurt too. It's crazy. this team looked like a championship team in that Toronto series last year. And if that few bounces go other ways in that game 7, maybe they would have won the championship last year. And that's insane to think about now that you look a year and a half later where they've ended up. And the Butler one is interesting because, I hear people say he wasn't going to stay no matter what. They obviously wouldn't stretch the contract that way. And so it was a little bit of both sides there, I'd imagine. It just looks like that going from there to Horford didn't make much sense. Looked like they were just throwing the money elsewhere. And all of a sudden you have those 3 contracts I mentioned for the foreseeable future. I'll leave it with this. And the series obviously isn't over yet, but the team looks broken. The coach looks done. He'll take the blame for this, fair or not. Now that we look back on it, there's been a book written about the process, as we call it. Did it ever meet where it was going? I know they had a great team last year. Now it looks like it's all falling apart. It looks like a situation that they're not going to be able to reconcile, just given the money on the books and everything. And as you talk about the GM, my big question is, did they ever even fulfill what the promise started? Not the promise, the process. There was no promise.
Yeah, the process was, the ultimate goal is a championship. So no, they've fallen short. But the way that Hinkie, the goal was to get the stars, and he did. He accumulated assets. He found a way to, he got you mentioned TJ McConnell, the Robert Covingtons of the world. Those guys were scrap heaps. Those guys got a chance to play on an NBA team and get regular minutes without having to worry about going back to the G League or fighting for minutes, because the Sixers had no intention of winning. And when people say, oh, tanking's gross and not fair to the fans, I'm like, they never lied to the fans. They went into the season with a bad team. Whereas the Suns, in all the years that they were, crappy, they tried to
unintentional
sell themselves as playoff teams, and then halfway through the season just sell off all their players or just literally sit them. So you could have bought a ticket to go see, Eric Bledsoe play if that's what you were into, and he's sitting on the bench just so that they would lose. To me, that was way worse. The fans that bought tickets, for whatever reason, season tickets for the Sixers, did not have any sort of illusion about what kind of team they were. And whether people are okay with that or not, I don't care, because as a Sixers fan, we just wanted a plan. We wanted to not be the 7th and 8th seed every year and picking 16th, It was like, you could get some good picks there. There's a good history of every few years finding a player there, but it's so much harder. Look at someone like Danny. You give him a top 3 pick, he's going to hit it out of the ballpark. But the track record for any GM that late in the round, it's tough. So, we just wanted hope, and Hinkie brought that. And so the process, to me, it worked. The process worked. What they were out to accomplish was to get the stars. Now, did they fit? No, they don't fit. But that doesn't mean that they can't win a championship together. The pieces around them need to fit. And what Elton Brand did this past year was just every smart decision, he just did the opposite. But I will say, you said that, it looks like you can't reconcile that roster. Man, my dream is to have someone like a Daryl Morey come in, and look what he's been able to do. He's rejiggered that roster so many different ways, when you just think that they're stuck and they're just like, nope, we have a new star to play with James Harden, a new roster. And it's going to take something like that. A Daryl Morey disciple, I don't know. What's that guy's name? Sam Hinkie. Remember him? But no, it's going to take some sort of really innovative, specialist to be able to move those guys. And they're going to have to suffer. They're going to have to trade picks and sacrifice the future. But look, I don't care about saving first-round picks. You've got the clock is ticking on the Embiid Simmons duo in terms of, look, Joel's 26 years old, and for someone with his health history, I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to be the best center in basketball. So the win now is win now. Handing out Horford that contract was just
harder.
The bias one to me is look, they traded so much again, they had to keep him. That they screwed themselves over. But look, he's a solid player. He's playing terrible. He doesn't play great when it's just him and Joe out there. He really needs Ben. So, and he needs to just be the guy. And in the playoffs, he's never going to be that. And he's not a spot up shooter. He's a mid range guy. And those guys hit 40% of their shots. And he's just happened to be hitting like 29%. So we'll see. I'm not giving up on this tandem. I am terrified of the management splitting them up for no reason this offseason. But maybe the shortened offseason will prevent them from doing that. But hopefully won't prevent them from getting a new GM. Not like I said, Elton seems like a great guy. In over his head.
Could be those two to go, and then the third is the big question: Will Embiid go? Will Simmons go? Do you need to split those three up? That's a conversation we'll have at a later date. But the way this is ending for Embiid, tough to watch. Getting swiped, running out of gas in these games, being left in the post on these spot ups, like it's sad. Like, I feel bad for the Sixers fans like you right now. And obviously you've said, you have work-related reasons for rooting for the Celtics too. But this is a rough way to go down the way they are now against this team, especially if you're bought into that Celtics 76ers rival. And me, the Celtics guy I am, I don't have to hold back my Celtic side when it comes to wearing the green goggles. I'm okay with that. What I have a tough time with is when I see other teams doing stupid things, going too hard on them, because last night I'm watching that game and I'm just like, ooh, I could say a lot of things about this other team right now. I could hammer that fan base, but I'm going to restrain myself a little bit because, wow, that was embarrassing in game two. I mean, Barkley said it on the air. That was an embarrassment for the organization that he played for. Probably one of their worst losses ever.
Yeah, what's funny is that it didn't feel like that to me. But that's because I've just been working in sports television for so long. And covering the Celtics for so long that it has blunted some of that for me, which is good. And I also had no expectation of the Sixers winning this series even before Ben got hurt. I was like, look, I know a lot of people in Boston are worried about the matchup with the Sixers. It's like Brad versus Brett is the only matchup that matters at this point. And I've experienced the Brett Brown experience, and it's Brad just has way more tricks up his sleeve and a roster that can, that's adjustable and versatile. They got wings, man. They got a ton of wings. And the Sixers just were a flawed roster. The roster was constructed terribly.
Every year, like for 4 years now, they've looked like the weirdest basketball team ever assembled. Guys that can't shoot together, 3 centers on the floor this year. Like, it's a mind, F, as they say. It's bad. Hopefully it'll get better. I hope for the best for Simmons and Embiid because they're both great. One of them may need to end up in a different place for them to, meet their pinnacle. And ultimately, I think Simmons will be there for the long haul in Philly with the extension he signed, and hopefully there'll be growth on his end too because he's a fun player. He's great to watch. That's the hope, I guess. You don't have to go the hinky right now for a rebuild. You can organize some things.
Right, and that's the thing. You need Ben to shoot. You need him to shoot, and I'm not expecting that, and that's the problem. Is that he literally, like his coach literally said publicly that he told him he wants him shooting at least 1 3 a game, and he didn't. He stopped shooting them from that point on, and it was like it was insane to me, and like that is just like that's insubordination. Like you need to be able to bench him, but it's like you can't bench your second best player, but and there's just nothing about his shot that makes me think it will ever be good. So
everybody
it looks
shares blame.
It looks worse than Markel's. It really does. And Markel has some courage and will actually shoot them. He'll put himself out there on TV in front of all those people watching with that shot that looks really gross, but he shoots it. And you know what? That matters. And Ben is absolutely worthless if he's not shooting. He just is. I'm sorry. He can't be a point guard in this league or an effective player if he's not a threat to shoot. So we'll see. I mean, I hope he proves me wrong, but look, I'm from Philadelphia. Expect the worst.